All right. Hey guys, our presentation is on the equal pay for the USA men's and women's soccer team. I'm Amy Collins.
And I'm Maggie Connolly. And we'll go ahead and get started. We will be debating, as Annie said, the inequality of pay between the women and the men's US soccer teams. So first of all, soccer is considered to be the most popular sport worldwide. The first Men's World Cup was held in 1930. Women weren't allowed to even play soccer until 1970. And the first Women's World Cup was held in 1991. The US women's soccer team is the most successful team in international women's soccer. They have won 4 Women's World Cup titles, 4 Olympic gold medals, and 8 CONCACAF Gold Cups. The men's soccer team has made 1 quarterfinal appearance since 1991 and didn't even qualify for the last World Cup in 2018 in Russia. Yet, the men's soccer team in a typical year on average earns approximately $13,000 a game, and the women's team approximately $5,000 a game. This does not include bonuses and benefits received for World Cup appearances and other successes that can add to income on both players' teams. So that is a large disparity in salaries between the men's team and the women's team. So next, I am going to provide an outline of points in proposition of the women's team earning the same salary as their male counterparts. Once these points have been described in the outline, I will elaborate on each of these arguments, establishing a strong position in favor of equal pay for the US women's soccer team players. The first point is equal pay for equal play. The second will be that pay should reflect worth and value. The third will be righting wrongs from the past. And the fourth will be political responsibility or social responsibility. So first, the equal pay for equal play. Simply, they're playing the same game that requires the same amount of input, the same effort, and takes the same amount of time. So if they should be paid the same amount of money. If 2 people at a company are doing the exact same job with the exact same title, isn't it not fair to expect that both of those employees would be receiving the same salary? These players are participating at an elite status of the sport and performing at the highest possible level. They have also had more success than their male counterparts, who have not made even a quarterfinal, as I said, since 1991. And who didn't even qualify for their last World Cup. For those who argue that men get more viewership, the Women's World Cup in 2019 exceeded all-time viewing records with over 1 billion views. That is a 56% increase from 2015 and more media attention than ever before. Getting back to same salary. If 2 employees are not receiving the same pay, there is a legitimate stance that the situation is an example of discrimination. This is a classic mistreatment of women rooted in sexism. Remember, women weren't even allowed to play since 1970. This has marginalized and devalued women, which moves me on to my second position. Pay should reflect worth and value. If women are truly to be valued and respected for their level of play and as people, then their pay should reflect it. Not paying them what they are worth or what is equivalent to their male counterparts sends a message that they are not as valued or not as worthy as male players. Think of the damage a message of this magnitude sends out to all women and little girls, your present and future daughters. If you provide equal pay, think about the message that sends to your daughters, your sisters, your aunts, your mothers. They are valued and worthy. And shouldn't the best players receive the best compensation? The best players in the world should be paid the best also. There should be a commitment from the powers that be to pay equally. My third argument. As I mentioned, women weren't even allowed to play until 1970 and didn't see a World Cup until 1991. Men's first World Cup was in 1930. That is decades of prohibition against women in this sport. This depicts a major injustice for the equality of women in sport. They've had to campaign just for the right to play. Women continue to have to face this wrong with an inequality now in pay. Organizations that oversee payment have a duty to assure equality in compensation. The players on the U.S. women's soccer team have done their part not only on the field, but off the field. They have contributed to increasing the desirability and popularity of the sport and have engaged in breaking barriers for women, not only in sport, but in society in general. Which leads me to the final point, the construct of political responsibility. This is taking responsibility for social change. This is standing up and representing women against forms of sexism and other forms of gender discrimination in society. This is a responsibility that the U.S. women's soccer team has accepted and thrive in pursuing off the field. They have presented themselves and behaved both professionally and with dignity. They have fought tenaciously for equality on and off the field, exhibiting strength and bravery. The least that can be done is to pay them equally. Thank you.
Now, going into why females should not be paid the same as the men's soccer team, specifically talking about the U.S. women's and men's soccer team. According to the 2010 census, females make up 50.8% of the population, while males make up 49.2%. And females make up 44% of NCAA athletes, leaving the other basically half male. And then we have 0.4% of females and 0.8% of males who play Division I soccer will go pro. What I want to point out from this is that there is obviously a pretty equal appearance of females and males in the world and in NCAA sports, which would be the college sports. But when it comes to professional, there are not as many options. It is not quite as even as you can see here. So going to the USA men's national soccer team, their minimum salary is $56,250 and their maximum salary can be up to $6 million. They also make lots of money through sponsorship deals and bonuses. And as I'll go into a little bit later, we have male athletes who will be viewed more by other people. So the USA women's soccer team, just so we can get an idea, their most players compete at the club level and get yearly salaries ranging from $16,000 to $538 to $46,200 since January 2019. Women also draw a second salary from the national team, which is where they can make this amount of money. They also receive income from sponsorship, deals, and bonuses the same as males, but it is very clear that males will make more money because they are viewed by more people. So one argument that I really want to go into is Title IX. So people like to say that women should be paid the same because of Title IX because it was established in 1972, and it said that institutions who receive federal funding cannot discriminate on the basis of sex, and they must have equal access to educational programs and activities. So yes, this makes sense that women and men need to be represented evenly. So this is having the same amount of teams in the college. Any school that is federally funded, they must have equal access for like a men's versus women's soccer team, or if they have a football team, they must have like maybe a tennis or volleyball team in order to keep their numbers the same. So as I said, there must be equal opportunities for males and females. But the difference in professional sports is that they're not federally funded. Their salaries are not going to be federally funded. Therefore, they receive the funding for their stadiums federally, but not salaries, as I said before. So the taxpayers that say that they're paying for these athletes and that they should be able to be paid the same, it doesn't qualify for this argument here. They're only paying for the stadium and then they're getting the money and support from the program. But again, this has nothing to do with the salaries of the players. So going into why they do not receive equal pay and why they shouldn't is because in the 2018 men's World Cup, there were 3.572 billion viewers. And in 2015, the Women's World Cup had 764 million viewers. So women's soccer receives less media coverage in Western countries as well. So this is one argument that kind of might stray away from the US women's team just a little bit. But according to Archer and Prang, they're not getting what women in this soccer sports are not getting as much view time on the TV or in the fan base. And that's where all the money comes from.
Okay, well, let me thank you, Annie, for that. And let me go ahead and just begin my rebuttal on those 3 points, the Title IX, the increased viewing, and the less media coverage. First, I'd like to address the Title IX point. The statute was developed to combat sex discrimination against women. This allotted for women to be able to participate and benefit from educational programs, including athletics. I get that Title IX falls under the stipulation of federally funded, but also falls under the stipulation of educational programs. This is not an educational program that we're referencing. We are speaking of professional sports at the most elite level. But getting back to Title IX, let us be reminded the spirit in which the statute was developed in the first place. Title IX was developed in order to give women equal opportunity that they were being denied. It was common knowledge that women were being discriminated against based on gender. It came into being to meet that need for reform. To attempt to manipulate its purpose in order to attempt to deny women their equal share is just wrong. So viewers, let's increase viewing. The second point of viewer audience, according to Yosting, viewership of the Women's World Cup has increased 56% from 2015 to 2019, with an increase in viewing time with an average of 20 minutes. So this isn't people just flipping the channels. This is proof that people are watching. This exhibits an increased interest in the women's soccer viewing. But people can't watch women's sports if the networks don't put them on the agenda. It has to be a viewing option for the women's soccer viewing public, which leads me to the next point that was made in reference to less media coverage. The women's team is not in control of the network schedule. The network determines what shows it will broadcast and what it won't broadcast. It is also up to the show executives whether they will adhere to the demands and/or requests of their viewing audience. The women's team has engaged in activities off the field to encourage and promote the sport, developing interest and enthusiasm in the sport from the viewing public. What the viewing public does with that enthusiasm is also out of the control of the team. If they choose to pressure the networks to televise the games and the networks adhere, problem solved. But as far as the team is concerned, they are doing all that is in their power. However, the present increase in viewership is evident that if the games make the show schedule, people more than likely will watch. To hold viewership and less media coverage against the women's team's pay equality is just wrong.
So now going into the question of, is it really equal? The point that Maggie brought up earlier was that it's the same sport, it's played the same amount of time, but it's ultimately different. Female soccer players, they don't run as much, they don't run as far. It's proven that male soccer players are going to be running further, and it's a lot slower of the game. Women have weaker leg muscles, so the ball doesn't travel as far. So a lot of times this leads to the viewing is because people tend to want to view a faster sport, a more competitive sport, a more violent sport, and they will choose to watch the male sports. Now, this is why it has continued to be on those networks and why they don't have as much access to the women's soccer team and their games. And then one other point that I really want to bring up to this point is females' corner kicks are higher, so they're more predictable. So it gives the defenders more of the ability to predict it. So therefore, it almost seems as though the women and the men have to play a different kind of game because the men have to react quicker and understand that the ball is going to come straight at them versus a higher ball where you can kind of defend and go into the correct position. So then I believe that both the USA and men's soccer teams have millions of fans. Don't get me wrong on that. I believe that they should both be valued and they both are worthy. But in my opinion, I don't think that that has anything to do with whether they should be paid equally or not, because more people view the men's soccer sports. Men typically watch men's sports. They watch the more competitive, the more violent. As you can see in this picture down here that I included, which I'll move this real quick, you can see that they're all together watching in a group. And then women typically watch male and female sports because they also want to have that competitive side, but then they also like to watch their role models and watch the women's teams perform as well. Athletes aren't paid based on skill. So whether we say that Megan Rapinoe is better than any other male player, it doesn't matter, unfortunately. But their salary is going to be based on how much money they bring into their program. And a lot of that money is going to be based on how many people are attending their games, how nice their stadium is, bringing in their fans, and how often people tune in on TV. So in my opinion, right and wrong, it is what it is. More must be changed before a salary can be changed. It's not the ultimate all end all be all right now that we can make happen. According to in 2017, the collective bargaining agreement went into act, and it shows that the women receive a 50% of pay from maternity leave, which I think is something positive that women are receiving. And they receive other benefits like dental care and health insurance. So being a part of this team isn't a terrible thing, and they are still getting proper treatment. But with the salary being less is because of the viewers and fan base and not having that ability to make as much money as the male teams do. So women in May pay structure is different everywhere. Every kind of institution, anything. So whether you're going to TD Bank, the males are going to most likely make more. And that's just the way it is in society today. Whether that's an issue or not, that's a different ethical debate that I'm not going to get into right now. And I think that more needs to be done politically before we can ultimately say that the salary is the issue between this, because I think that there's more to this debate that could have been said between both Maggie and I. And I know that we both agree that great points have been brought up. And I think that overall, it's going to be up to people to change more than just the salary. And I don't think that the salary needs to be the first thing that needs to be changed because currently it's ethical. And then these are our references. Thank you guys for tuning in for our debate.
Thank you.